because of the invasion of frac sand mining into my area. Years have gone by, I ran for the county board in Trimble County where I live, and now the chairman of the Trimble County Board. I guess that means more volume. So that's all you need to know about me for the time being. This presentation focuses mostly on the work of Ted, and he asked me to mention a paper called, I forget the name of it, but it has something to do with unconventional energy. I guess I'll let him talk about it. If you read his biography, you'll see that he has been very active. He's a young man, but he's been very active in documenting the effects of energy extraction around the country. It's a very long and impressive biography. I think I'll get out of the way and let him talk about what he's been doing for the last few years.
Thanks, Tim. Okay, thanks. So they didn't have a PowerPoint turner, so I'm using this. It makes me feel like I'm on a set of Star Trek or something like that. And then if I get beamed up, if I press the thing and I get beamed up and I'm gone, Dwight can give my talk. He knows. Yes. So my name is Ted Auch. I've been working at Frac Tracker for 6 years. I also teach adjunct at Cleveland State Environmental Science and Geology. And most of what I've been doing at Frac Tracker, we're a 501c3 nonprofit. So we started out at Pittsburgh. We have offices in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, Ithaca. I'm in Cleveland, Ohio. We have some folks in Oakland, California. But the mission of Frac Tracker, the Frac Tracker Alliance, you can see some of our funders down here. Some of you might know Save the Hills. They funded some of the work that I've been doing. This is our primary foundation support in Ohio, where I work a lot. But the reason that these foundations have given us money, and the reason that we've lasted for 8 years as a small kind of nonprofit, is that, as you all know, hydraulic fracturing is a very contentious issue. It has a lot of volume, a lot of empirical evidence as to the effects of it, a lot of anecdotal evidence as to the effects of it, but it's gotten very heated. And really what we try to do at Frac Tracker is we try to develop, identify, and fill in the data gaps with respect to the influence of the oil and gas industry writ large on the environment, on communities, on economies, that kind of thing. So we do quite a bit of mapping, as you can see here. Here's a map of the United States, and this is where all those red dots, those are active silica sand mines to date right now, and I've had some arrows pointing from those dots to some of the photos that I've been taking, because I found a lot in my work, and this is kind of thanks to my wife, is that I present a lot of graphs and charts and numbers. But my wife always says to me, you got to present more pictures. People don't like seeing bars and graphs. So I try to lighten up the mood and show some photos, and I really do think that you can't understand the impact of frac sand mining unless you fly up above these mines and see what they look like from the air, and I do quite a bit of that. What Tim was talking about is a recent paper that we just wrote, the human right to water and hydraulic fracturing. It was in a peer-reviewed paper, or a peer-reviewed journal that we just put out a couple months ago. And the take-home message of the work that we're doing is that the oil and gas industry, the unconventional oil and gas industry, which frac sand mining is intimately associated with, okay, you cannot decouple sand mining or the injection wells in Oklahoma or the infrastructure of the Gulf of Mexico from the entire ecosystem that is oil and gas development. They're one big ecosystem. But the take-home message is that this industry across the United States is having a tremendous impact on the landscape, physical alteration, on watersheds, on hydrology, water quality and quantity by way of all sorts of things that I'll talk about and some that I won't, and then on waste. They produce a tremendous amount of waste. And the reason that that's critical is because this industry, and I'll get to this in a minute, is becoming less and less efficient with respect to what they pull out of the ground, that is oil and gas, and what they put into the ground to get that stuff. Right? So economists, environmental economists call this energy return on energy invested. That's how many units of energy you have to put into something to get a unit of energy out of something. This industry, even when they started at the beginning, was way down on the league tables as far as that's concerned. Very, very inefficient and getting more inefficient as they go. So let me just start, and I've got to thank some partners. I work with this nonprofit called Auch, which gets me up in the air and allows me to take some amazing photos. For those of you that don't know Lighthawk and their sister organization, South Winds, in the south part of the United States, I highly recommend going to their website. They do some amazing work. They bring pilots, professional pilots in under their umbrella to donate their time and their plans for this kind of work. These are some photos that I took. Oh man, I took these. I'm showing these at the beginning because this is the first time I'd ever seen sand mines in person. I was up in west central Wisconsin in 2013. I met with some folks at the West Central Wisconsin Planning Commission, and they gave us a kind of bells and whistles tour along with Superior Silica. And then we stopped at a golf course to have lunch with Superior Silica. I forget the gentleman's name who was running Superior Silica. But anyway, we were sitting there having lunch, and I said, I have to go. I'm going to do a flight over these sand mines. He goes, "You're what? Why are you doing that? We're showing you everything you need to see." I'm like, "No, I'd rather see this from the air. Do you mind?" He's like, "Well, we have a lot more to see in the day." I said, "Nah, I had this schedule, so I'm going to go do it." So I went to Chippewa Valley Regional Airport, took off with the corporate pilot for Target. He flew down from Minneapolis. He met me at Chippewa Valley Regional Airport, and we took all these photos. So this is what I saw, and I was just struck because I have a background in mine reclamation, coal mine reclamation, back when I was a graduate student at Virginia Tech, looking at what we were going to do with strip mines and mountaintop removal. The answer is not much, right? So you all anecdotally or just visually know that mining is a really bad deal. Not a lot that you can generate from an ecosystem services or from an agricultural standpoint from these mines once you mine them. And what I was struck by was, my gosh, this is all happening all over again in west central Wisconsin. And then you would go and you Google search frac sand mining or something. And who came up all the time? Pat Popple. She was the only one that ever came up. It was like, who is this woman? And I need to talk to her because I'm super interested in this topic. I hadn't even met her when I was up here that time. And she got very mad at me when I talked to her the first time. She said, "Why didn't you find me?" I said, "Oh, Pat, I didn't even know who you were." She said, "Well, yeah, you need to." And she sent me a whole bunch of literature, peer-reviewed and otherwise. And I was just struck by the fact that the media, the national media, and researchers are paying so little attention to this component of the industry, and rightly a lot to the flaring and the pipelines and all that stuff. That's of course important, but very little to this. So I've kind of made it one of my missions to get journalists, authors, academics to kind of reallocate some of their resources to studying this, not just in Wisconsin, but in Illinois and Michigan, and a little bit in Minnesota, because there's just so few resources going to the impacts of this. I'm giving you a presentation I'm assuming that there's kind of some in this room that know quite a bit about this industry, some that know very, very little about this. I'm going to try to split the difference. And this is a slide that just kind of tells you, the history of this whole thing, right? Back in the 80s, the 70s, 80s, 90s, there was a lot of sand being mined in Texas and Oklahoma because it was really close to where they were all active. But ever since the North Dakota Bakken opened up, the Marcellus and Utica, where I live, in PA and West Virginia and Ohio opened up, the industry said, "Geez, we need to find something closer to where we're working. So we need to find something that's closer to where we're working, something that's more crush resistant, yada yada yada." Well, enter west central Wisconsin, right? But also enter LaSalle County, Illinois, Monroe County, Michigan, Ludington, Michigan, Southwest LaSure County, Minnesota. So it's not just you all. It's not just west central Wisconsin. This thing is taking place at a rapid rate in many, many other places. This is just kind of visually, I think this always helps to see the compare and contrast of the Brady Brown. This stuff is now being exploited even more in the last couple of years. And for me, this is a market thing, right? Because the oil and gas industry is always going to tell you that market forces are what we adhere to. Well, market forces tell them that when the price of oil and gas dropped off a cliff a couple of years ago, we got to find a cheaper source of sand. Enter, or I should say re-enter Brady Brown. But that doesn't mean that they are not trying to come back here or to some of the places I just mentioned and more expand their footprint here, because they are, and we'll get to that in a second. But anyway, that's kind of what we're talking about. Those are the differences. This stuff is more pure, less silts, less clays. The Brady Brown is pretty nasty. But when you're desperate, we'll all go to something cheaper when we're desperate, and that's what they do and have done a little bit more in the last couple of years. This is a map of the national sand plays, past, present, future. This is a USGS map that they put together. They actually just put this publication out in the last 2 years. But this shows you different shale plays according to USGS researchers and the different kinds of stuff that you can get out of those sands. So not all sands are created equal. Interestingly enough, up here just south of Detroit in Monroe County is the Sylvanian sandstone formation, which is 99% pure and being overexploited today. The point I want to mention about that one south of Detroit is, unlike where you all live or where we are right now, there's a lot of people underneath that sand play outside of Detroit. So there's a lot of resistance, but at the same time, the company US Silica is making quite a bit of headway in expanding their footprint there. But this is kind of the national play. And the reason I'd like to mention this is, first off, I don't ever see them really relying on some of the sands that we have in where I live in Pennsylvania. It doesn't seem like it's a reasonable thing to expect, no matter how desperate they get, because they're always going to have the Brady Brown sands and these formations here. But the reason that I do mention this is because look, if you look, and I didn't overlay it here, but if you look at where the sands are, they're where fracking pretty much isn't, right? So this expands what we call NIMP, the kind of like not in my backyard thing, because if you're worried about fracking, you're probably not worried about sand mining and vice versa. But the point that I'm trying to convey to you all is, again, one big network, and it's happening everywhere in this country. It's happening in Chicago, where BP is expanding to process frac sand and gas and oil. So this network is expanding. It's important to keep in mind that frac sand mining is intimate or is integral to that expansion. So as I said, I take quite a few pictures. This was actually just in July. We flew over some of the mines that you have here, and I just find this to be really. This is down in this is in Toma. This is High Crush's mine in Toma. This is, I think, what is it, 94 or 90 is the big code? Yeah, so 94 is right here. This is Bill Greendeer, who's at this conference today. He showed me around this site. We stood right down here, right at that little edge right there, on this little berm yesterday, actually, and to look out and to see how much expansion is taking place. This has already been mined as of when we were there yesterday. And so I took these photos in July, right? They're already back in here. They're planning to come all the way through here. So ridgeline upon ridgeline just set to be just crushed, okay? So this gives you a sense for the scale and scope of these mines. There's massive mines. The important thing to keep in mind is the average mine proposal is getting bigger, and I'll get to that in a second. But this is more the new normal, okay? What we see in Toma, what they see in Alma Center and some of those communities is more the new normal. And I'll talk to you a little bit about why I think that is the new normal. This is Dwight, you'll recognize this one. So Dwight Swenson, who's sitting right there, he lives right here, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Just east of it.
Right. Dwight's house is right here, and Mark Settlebauer is right here, right?
Correct.
Right. So this is a massive. Who owns this?
That's Wisconsin Province, but it's Schlumberger, actually.
Right. So this is. I mean, this is it. Okay. So there was a lot of working. There's a lot of really mom and pop mines going on in north central area of western Wisconsin. In my opinion, those are a thing of the past. I think the mega mines are what this industry is talking about, right? Because economics dictates that the economy of scale says that more profitability from larger mines. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. There's some text here, but I won't spend too much time on that. But it is worth noting that 41% of historical silica sand mine production and 82% of revenue has come since the mid-90s. There's a tremendous amount of money being made by these guys and gals in this industry. You can see here a quote from EOG Resources CEO. I don't know if he's still their CEO, but you can see, there's a lot of money here. This is some really interesting USGS data all the way back to 1902. This red line is consumption of silica sand. This blue line is value per ton. And then this green is a cumulative surplus of silica sand in the United States. And the reason I show you that is, well, obviously, consumption is going up. I mean, look at this. This is like the CO2 graph, the climate change CO2 graph that we all see. So this is that hockey stick moment that we've all seen in other contexts, which is now hitting the stage with the sand mining. But this is an important thing to mention. This green line, this is total cumulative surplus in the United States of sand. And the reason I like to show that figure is a lot of times you hear, market analysts, this, that, the other thing, talking about efficient markets, right? How markets kind of operate really efficiently with regard to supply and demand. Well, this shows that it doesn't, because there's all the sand sitting out there that these guys aren't even using. They're going for different sands from different places, leaving in their wake all this surplus sand. They haven't even used it, and yet they're exploring, in places like here in Illinois and that kind of thing. So it's important to keep in mind. I should mention that obviously this blue line is in dollars per ton. These other ones are in millions of tons, okay? But I just kind of standardized on this graph. But I just think this gives you a sense for what's at stake here. Kind of what you, as organizers, as activists, as concerned citizens are up against, if you don't already know this, tremendous amount of revenue being generated by these companies. And what are they doing? They're merging, they're acquiring, they're vertically integrating. Okay, so this is all happening, all in the name of maximizing revenue. So I think this is not the greatest slide, but I think this is an interesting slide because what I hear in Ohio with regard to fracking is jobs, 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 jobs. That's what I always hear from Ohio Oil and Gas Association, Energy in Depth, all the talking heads for oil and gas industry. But what we've shown in Ohio is that indeed what we see with regard to jobs is job migration. Folks come in from Oklahoma and Texas to Ohio, very skilled oil and gas workers, and then they just migrate. They follow the drill rigs. Like a migrant worker in California would follow the growing season. Okay, so there's no jobs being generated in Ohio, and the reason I show this graph is because this is average sand produced per ton in the United States. So this industry is becoming incredibly automated. Okay, and the reason I show this graph is because there's a couple factors at play that make me think that if I can just back up a couple slides, that this is the new normal. And those things that make me think that are that this industry is they've learned from what they did well in places like Wisconsin, or what they did poorly in places like Wisconsin, and what they've done well in places like Illinois. And that is we need to be close to rail, we need to be monster, 15, 16, 1,700 acres, okay? And we need to automate the heck out of these operations, okay? Because the only way that we're going to be profitable is A plus B plus C happening. So that's critical to realize, because if you look at some of the areas, again, Alma Center, and I'm forgetting some of the names of the communities in the South, we're talking about 1,600 acre proposals, not 50, 60 acre proposals. Orders of magnitude increases in what we're talking about. Why? Why is this happening? Well, you all are really concerned with, or maybe slightly concerned with, the effects of sand mining in your community. But as I mentioned, there's no if there's no demand in the oil and gas fields, right? And what we're seeing in the oil and gas fields, especially in West Virginia and Ohio where I work, is the demand for sand is going through the roof to the tune of 9 to 11% per well, right? So what that means is that the industry is getting less efficient, but requiring more stuff to get that oil and gas out of the ground. Why? Well, because investors, analysts on Wall Street are saying, look, we don't care how you get the thing out of the ground, just get it. Get the darn gas and the oil out of the ground. We don't care. Just get it out. And so what the industry in Ohio is saying, Gulfport, EOG, Antero, all these other companies, Chesapeake to a lesser degree, all these big companies are saying, we know that if we use a tremendous amount of water and sand, in addition to the tremendous amounts of water and sand that we're already using, we're going to get a return on investment. It's going to justify everything that we do to our investors, to the analysts on Wall Street, and we will manage to live another day. So that's the key here. And this is just a figure that shows you some of the stuff that we're seeing. So it used to be 4,200 to 5,000 tons of proppant per well in the state of Ohio and West Virginia. But again, our laterals are getting longer. So you all know what unconventional oil and gas is. It's these laterals that go out 7,000 feet. Okay? Well, those laterals are getting longer. They're using more water, more sand. So all that puts pressure on west central Wisconsin, on LaSalle County and the like.
Let's put pressure on the water resource.
Yeah, yours and ours. Right. And I'll get to that in a second. So one thing that's really been interesting to me is, okay, so I can tell you with pretty good certainty with the models that we've developed and others have developed, that the demand side of the equation is going through the roof, right? It's hit that another hockey stick moment, okay? I can tell you that pretty certainly because we have quite a bit of really good data that we've been compiling. But what I can't tell you, and what we should be able to tell everyone, tell each other, is Joe Schmo's mine, Canadian Sands and Province, or you name the company. How much sand is that mine producing every year? Well, good luck. Okay. I showed you how many confirmed silica sand mines there are in the United States. I can only find, and believe me, I've dug. I can only find production numbers for 25, 30 of them. So there's a huge gap in what we know about this industry from a supply side perspective. This isn't militant, this isn't anything crazy, this is just basic supply, demand, market force stuff that we need to understand as citizens and as, policy creators, that kind of thing, and we just don't know it. I show you these two figures right here because I'm working with the folks at Auch right now to try to figure out if we can use 3D cameras to infer production from mines. They've done a really good job with that in Nevada, doing some other types of minerals. So this is some imagery that we've collected with Auch in Nevada. So you can see you can develop 3D imagery where you can develop a cross section if you know the density of the rock. This is really inside baseball stuff, but I'm going to tell you it anyway. Then you can figure out how much came out of there. That's the lengths that we all have to go to get these numbers. That's not the way it should be. We should be able to go to the U.S. Geological Survey and say, hey, look, Jim Smith's mine, how much came out last year? 60,000 tons. 60,000 tons. That's how easy it should be, but it's not that easy. This is an interesting map because this is my kind of baby. This is my Frac sand industrial complex map that I built. This is all confirmed silica sand mines or sand mines that exist in what I would call profitable sand geologies, as well as all other types of corporations, infrastructure associated with that whole ecosystem. So this shows that sand mining isn't just restricted to, I don't know what the number is in Wisconsin, number of mines in Wisconsin. This thing is built out everywhere. It's this whole supply chain. And I like to show these pictures because, well, for example, this is one picture I really like. That I just took, that's in LeSueur County, Minnesota, gosh, 4 years ago. I can't tell you how many times I've been trying to go down roads to photograph these mines, and these roads are closed because the mines are going right through them. I think that's happened to me 6 or 7 times. It happened to me again yesterday down in, east of Barrow, on my way to my Wisconsin geography. You're catching me here, but it's happening again. So I can't tell you how many times I've seen these roads that just get closed off because these mines are going straight through them. It happens all the time. This is important to show, okay? Because, and this is something that Pat brought up to me a long, long time ago. This industry needs rail. They need rail spurs, they need mature rail lines. They need to get their product to market. Every time they dig it up, put it in a truck, and that truck goes somewhere, that's margin, that's top line. That hits them hard. This is, by the way, these are not photos of the same rail spurs. This is all different rail spurs around western Wisconsin. Okay. So you all, again, I'm seeing some nodding heads that you've all seen this, but I just wanted you to see this from the air. This is what we saw in July. And this strikes me because this is exactly what I saw in LaSalle County, Illinois when I was there in May. Is those folks in Illinois, US Silica, Unimin, Fairmont, all the players that you've all heard of here in Wisconsin, they're all active there. And when you all saw the lull in sand mining back in, what, 14, 15, something like that, 15, 16? No, that didn't happen in Illinois. They kept going. Why? Because they had big mines, close to rail, highly automated. All of those factors were at play, so they never experienced the lull that you've experienced in Wisconsin. And they're trying to replicate that in the southern part of this Wisconsin sand play, which is, I think, critical to understand. You're not going to see the 60-acre parcel proposals anymore. You might see less mine proposals, but if you used to have 10 sand mine proposals for 60 acres, and now you get 4 for 1,600 acres, it's still a net increase in the number of acres, right? So a tremendous amount of increase, and it's not just the mine's footprint, it's all this other stuff here too. So this kind of gets me also back to what I said, which is I'm really keenly interested in where the stuff is produced. Obviously, we've talked about that. Where it's going, who's using it, and how it gets there. And it's very hard to figure out this stuff as well. But what we did do, and this is some of the ways that I've been able to get tonnage from some of these mines, is Superior Silica Sands is a publicly traded firm. And some of you in this room might know who their parent company is. I can't remember off the top of my head. But anyway, if you're a publicly traded company, you have to report 10K forms to the Securities and Exchange Commission. And in those forms, there's a tremendous amount of information. And in that form for Superior Silica in 2015, I was able to determine where their sand is going. I think that's a pretty good proxy for where the Wisconsin sand is going. And you can see here are the percentages. That's just the percentage of their sand that's going into these different places, right? So again, this answers a very basic question in a very kind of circuitous way. It shouldn't be that way. We should be able to get a lot of this information in a much more straightforward way. Okay, so there's some small text. Does anyone know what this book is? There we go. So I have a 5-year-old and a 10-month-old, and my 5-year-old loves the borax. And every time I get to this section of the borax, I actually think about the sand mining thing, which I don't. I'm sorry, but that's just what I think about. So I'm kind of interspersing that with some quotes of the people that I've spoken to. One of the big things that I'm trying to do with my work at Frac Tracker is to collect the stories, the audio stories of the folks that have been impacted by sand mining, whether they're farmers, local residents, you name it. I think that it's important that we archive and have a baseline for how people felt at certain points in the history of this. We need to kind of put a marker down. And so that's what we're doing, is collecting these stories, collecting these photographs, because I think that stories, people's stories, the photographs that I've taken, they're as valid a source of data as a spreadsheet, in my opinion. I think people are seeing more and more that that is indeed the case. There's just some more quotes. These are actually from folks I met in Michigan, where Sergeant Sand is a very big player on the coast of Lake Michigan, right up near Ludington, decimating the dune ecosystems up in Ludington, Michigan, also one of the biggest state parks in Michigan. But you can see here, you all share some of the same concerns with these folks in other parts of the country.
They mining the sand dunes, they're taking that sand?
Yeah, so Sergeant Sand is a legacy producer of sand, but they've gotten big into frac sand. And they are legacy, they're nested within the Ludington State Park, let's say 2 hours southwest of St. Sleeping Bear Dunes. And they're producing a whole heck of a lot of sand. And the thing with them is they don't make the highest quality sand. It's not like what you have here, but the barriers to getting it are much less, because all you got to do is just go scrape off the top, and the stuff is sitting right there. You just take off a couple of jack pine trees or whatever, and it's right there, and then you get it to market.
So it's cheap and the industry still wants it.
It's cheap for them to get out of the ground, so it's the equivalent of the Brady Brown stuff, but closer to the industry. Plus they're close to rail, so they can get right down to Detroit and then go east-west from there. Yep.
So the mine is in the state park?
Yeah, it's legacied into the state park. Yep. Chances are they're going to close down in the next couple of years. But needless to say, it's had a tremendous impact on the communities. I think Sargent is a really good example of how these mines really divide communities, though, more than it is an example of how it's decimated the landscape. If you meet people in Ludington, Michigan, it has just created quite a few enemies amongst people that were friends at one point. I think that's really tragic, because once the industry leaves and the companies and the shareholders have their profits, you're left standing when the music stops. And now you have to heal those social wounds, whether they can or can't be healed. I don't know about that, but that's a lot of what happens.
Will they argue that once the mine is closed down, it'll fill in with groundwater and you'll have a nice lake?
Yeah, it's filling now, so they're what they're wet mining. They're dredging it right now.
Okay.
So they are doing that, and they'll present you bells and whistles proposals for reclamation, which we could all. That's a whole nother conversation. But yeah, that's exactly what they're arguing.
What was the name of the forest again?
Ludington State Park, and it has if you look at Michigan, what I find interesting about this site too is it's where some of the founding ecological science that occurred in this country took place on those dunes, as far as successional stuff and some of the more nuanced ecological work that was done in the United States was done in Ludington State Park, because they looked at how plant communities change as they go further and further away from the dunes. And those same dunes are kind of under siege from this mining. Hopefully they go out of business. there's a lot of numbers, and I'm not going to go through these numbers, but what I am going to just tell you is that there's another way. If the effect on the environment, the effect on the landscape, the effect on communities, health, all that stuff, is not something that moves you or that doesn't move others, there's a way to monetize this stuff. It's called ecological economics. It's where you kind of put a dollar value on the service provided by any one system or a parcel, right? And so we've done quite a bit of that work trying to monetize the value of the sand. Not the sand specifically, but the ecosystems above them. Whether it's crops, forest, wood products, you name it, wildlife, all that stuff. And to me, I mean, you would hope that just the kind of destruction would move people, but a lot of times it doesn't. So if it's a dollar figure that kind of moves you, then so be it. I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide, only to say that what I find very different in Wisconsin versus some of the other states I've looked is this kind of selective picking off of forested areas for these mines. We have an already fragmented landscape in Wisconsin, and then what I heard the first time I came here in 2013 from West Central Wisconsin's folks was that they're going to these farmers and saying, hey, listen, you have this forested bluff. If you have this forested bluff, we can chop it off, take the sand, reclaim it, and you can have it back. And so I find that to be a kind of a double whammy against some of these beautiful forests and working landscapes you have here. I'll probably skip this one. This is something Pat and I were working on, trying to value the ecosystem services in an individual proposal. So again, you can see I'm going from the regional down to the county level, down to the local. And this is some of the work that we're doing, we continue to do, to try to value what's coming off the land. I think that's critical today. We got some money. From Save the Hills Alliance to try to figure out what actually what does a mine look like. We know what it looks like from a photo, but kind of figuring out what constitutes a mine: buildings, cleared land, the actual mine, miscellaneous infrastructure, so on and so forth. To kind of really dig deep into what do these things look like. And the take home here is, and you can see here, this is a two-way interaction here. These are different components for a given mine, and this is what was displaced by those mines. And we looked at this is all in acres. And we looked at this across 78 mines. And the reason that this is important is you can go through every one of these numbers, but the most important thing to me is we looked at 78 mines, 1,100 acres of forest and 3,700 acres of cropland. Those 78 mines constitute, on average, 65 to 70 acres in area. That's a bygone era. There's not going to be any more of those anymore. I'm talking about orders of magnitude increases in what they're talking about for mines. So now we're going to get into like the future concerns, and I don't even know if these are future. I'm sure these are current in some of the areas. This is photos that I've taken in the Sargent Sand up in Wisconsin, or up in Michigan. So you can see, sir, you were asking about this. This is where they're mining, and this is where they're reclaiming. I'm not even sure if reclaiming is a word that I would use for what they're doing, but moving around decks on the Titanic is more like it. But anyway, so you can see that's some of the stuff that we're concerned with. This is an interesting graph right here on the top right. This is average proppant sand demand per well in West Virginia and Ohio. What does it tell you? The graph's going from the bottom left to the top right. That trend is going up, up, and away. So they're using more and more sand to get out less and less, or maybe about the same gas and oil. Why is that? Well, this is a take-home slide that this is a slide I think is really important for you all in Wisconsin to understand. Is that this is what we're seeing in Ohio, and this is a typical example. This is the walleye pad that I took a photo of. I took this 8 months ago, and then I took this 4 days ago. This pad, they're going to be using 87 million gallons of water for one unconventional lateral and 25,000 tons of proppant. Okay? I told you a little bit earlier that proppant demand, sand demand, is going up by about 9 to 10% per well. I did all that work before these things came online. These are what the oil and gas industry is calling super laterals, 3 to 4 miles in length. Okay, tremendous. You can see here, this is actually Noble County, Ohio, where I spend a lot of my time. These highlighted wells, they're not coming through very well in this, but these are all wells that are over 2 miles in length. Okay. So what this tells you is that this is, I like to say that this is the desperation phase in this industry. We would hope that that means that they're about to peter out. The problem is what do they leave in their wake, right? But I do think that this is the new normal. And we do need to kind of account for this in some of our projections. And I think that you all, in trying to understand what this means for you, need to kind of absorb the fact that this means that this industry is going to need much bigger mines. And that is what you're fighting. It's not the small mom and pops. It's the big multinationals who are going to be coming in here. The other reason is these laterals are getting longer. Some of this might be hard to see, but the other thing is that these wells die off really quick. They're 3-year wells. From the first year to the second year, production falls off by 85%. Okay, so what does that tell you? That means that's this year 1 and then year 2. And then it peters out and then it just kind of slowly fades away. That means they have to permit 7 wells in Ohio and West Virginia for one producing well. Every time they hit on a well, that well is going to be more and more of these wells. Not the 7,000-foot laterals with 10 million gallons of water and 4,500 tons of proppant. The 4-mile wells with north of 70 million gallons and north of 20,000 tons of proppant. Okay? And that's all because they're seeing what we see. Okay, if I'm doing this analysis with just little old me and my colleagues at Frac Tracker, they have way more resources in the oil and gas industry. They're seeing what we're seeing and they're just getting, kind of pulling their hair out here. So I'll fly through this quick. I just want to show you this. This is as an example of Unimin in Ottawa, Minnesota. This is their current footprint as of 2015. This is what they could expand to, 6,500 acres. So these companies own a tremendous amount of land, which again, you all know. But I just want to kind of clarify, given the three previous slides I've showed you, that it's realistic to ask the question, do you guys plan to use all of this? And in Illinois, they absolutely do plan to use it, but they are not going to be doing it in the typical way that we've known the last couple of years. Just another example, this is in Missouri. Okay, so this shows you that sand mining isn't just happening here. Arkansas, the expansion could take place. Let's see, this is outside of Detroit. This is that one I just mentioned to you in Rockwood, Michigan. Pat and I know a gentleman named Doug Wood who lives right here, and his house is crumbling because they keep blasting. He lives right here. The current footprint of the mine is right here, and he lives right here. And this is a potential footprint of this mine, so he would be literally surrounded. But what you see here is the population density is way higher than western Wisconsin. Yeah, I'll fly through that. Needless to say, the point from these slides is that the rate at which these guys expand used to be 1.5 to 2 acres per year. But I'm going to contend that it's going to be more like 6 or 7 acres per year, maybe 8, 9, 10 acres per year, if they really get what they want. And if the market bears, and the market right now is bearing, because the oil and gas industry is desperate for it. So this is more of that work that we've done trying to quantify what is above these sand plays. A lot of what I'm trying to do, because I have a background in soils, is trying to figure out where are the healthiest soils, where are the healthiest ecosystems, and what is at risk in the different states where sand mining is happening today. So we've done quite a bit of work on that. And you can see some of the numbers, I won't go over them, but basically the way that I've prioritized it is I've taken different land covers and I've tried to assign states to those land covers as far as what is a primary concern if sand mining runs its course in those different states. We talked about this a little bit. This is an interesting thing. So the St. Peter sandstone forests and grasslands offset annual CO2 emissions of 5.6 million Americans every year. So there's a tremendous amount of carbon being sunk into these ecosystems that will never be recovered, will not happen, and will never be recovered if we start to mine the heck out of it. So this is just more of that work, just kind of talking about some of the ecosystem services that are provided here. It's a non-trivial number, okay? If we keep altering the landscape the way that we are in the name of sand mining, I like to look at this as a struggle between food and energy, right? This is like, I saw this in LaSalle County when I was down there, where I met with some folks there, and they kept telling me, LaSalle County is number 1, number 3 soy and corn being producing county in the country every year on a per acre basis. And we're talking about expanding the footprint of sand mining in this county to 25 to 35% of the landscape. Someone's going to lose out on that. It's going to be commodity farmers, but eventually it will be actually real food producing farmers. So, that struggle between soil, between energy and food is something that I see percolating not just in the oil and gas fields, but in the sand mining areas as well. And the reason I find that interesting is because I'm hoping that sand miners and farm bureaus start to wake up and see, you know what, we need to engage this conversation. I don't know if they're doing it in Wisconsin, I can't speak to that, but in oil and gas fields in West Virginia and Ohio, they're not. They're silent. The only time they ever talk is when a pipeline explodes and it screws up a guy's corn production. This is what I call the kind of spotted owl slides. A lot of people don't find the rights of individual species or endangered species to be a compelling reason to protect something. I personally do. But I have found in Southeast Ohio and West Virginia, when you bring up things, certain charismatic species like the Hellbender Salamander, that really divides quite a few people. So I prefer not to talk about that. But I personally am very interested in that. These are some of the species that are at risk that you all know here in Wisconsin. And I've done a little bit of this species work in Michigan as well. But again, I'm not sure, depending on the person you're talking to or the policymaker that you're talking to, whether this is something that moves them. Usually it's a dividing thing, unfortunately. This is Michigan. I find this to be really critical because these dunes are something you can never replace. You can never get them back. And you look at all the threatened or endangered species in Michigan. So this is what those folks are fighting. Similar fights to what you all are fighting. But indeed, the issues are kind of replete everywhere. I did want to show you this because the state of Michigan views this one. This is called the Rosie Mound site. This is a former frac sand mine on Lake Michigan. This is Lake Michigan. State of Michigan, DEQ, calls this a reclamation success right there. That's success to them. So I think that's a caveat to you all and to others that that's how we quantify success. To me, is just, that's irresponsible. And we saw the same thing with coal mining in West Virginia. If you can get hydroseed, green grass down all year, that's a success, according to the Bureau of Land Management and all those other things. So it's really unfortunate that's how we define success. This is just some examples of some of the other work that people are doing. I think there's a lot of positive work being done on sand mining. I don't think there's nearly enough. I mean, we need an order of magnitude more work to be done. Some of you know Tom Pearson, who wrote this book. There's some folks at UW-Madison, Evelyn Hammond, I think she's probably interviewed some of you. And some folks at University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee did some good work. But needless to say, not nearly enough. I did want to kind of just show you this to just reinforce. This is a graph, and this, before your eyes glaze over, I just want to show you. This is a graph of water demand in the state of Ohio for fracking, right? So this is an exponential trend, and it's important to kind of feedback and realize that if you live in Eau Claire or you live in Chippewa County, you are connected to the shale fields by way of this graph. Because this graph could easily just be sand, okay? So it's the same thing. And this is going to put pressure on your communities and your landscapes as well. So, kind of to finish up, some of the work that I've been doing on, actually Ed brought this up to me a while ago, is this whole high cap well phenomenon here in Wisconsin, which is, I hadn't thought about until this past summer. But I've been compiling some high capacity well data for your sand mines, your IN65, as the state likes to call them, sand mines. And this is from, this is months between January 2010 and December 2007. This is high cap well volume for the sand mines. This gray line is cumulative demand. So what are we at? We're at 30 billion gallons of water used by the oil and gas industry, by the sand mining industry, and this is monthly changes. So this is a big pulse press kind of thing where you have incredible stresses being put on the hydrology, on your aquifers and that kind of thing. And this kind of thing is not going to go away. It's not going to fade unless you fight it hard and make sure that this is something that gets hammered at. Because if you don't have water, you have nothing. I think I'll just leave it here. This is just a graph that we put together of the individual mines and their high cap well volume. So you guys see how many zeros are over there? Tremendous amount of water being used by the sand mining industry. And I just think that the water thing and the waste thing is the key to this whole thing. And if you really want to hammer away at this industry, we need to highlight the three things: waste, water, and land. Those are the three components of this industry that are unsustainable, that I think translate to a broad audience. So yeah, with that, I'll quit.
And thank you, Ted. I have a feeling that the room is full of people who already know quite a bit about this. Is there anyone for whom this is news? Maybe you may have some questions for Ted. And I'm going to give him a little chance to catch his breath and recover his composure. So, if you is this all new, or are you one of the people who's been involved with this since the beginning, and you're already pretty much aware of the problem?
A lot of this is new to me. The detail that you're getting into, it sounds like a lot of you have been affected
Where are you
by this.
from, sir?
I actually retired from the Department of Natural Resources a year ago.
Are you a Wisconsin resident?
Yes, I am. I'm right here in Oak Cliff.
I can only wonder where have you been for the last seven
Well,
or 8 years?
working with a lot of different issues,
Okay.
but you know, and obviously I worked in the regional office here, and a lot of my cohorts were working with Frac. Frac is a good customer. We're getting them permits all the time, and visiting with their CEOs and other folks on golf courses and the like. Our regional director is good friends with a number of them. So, but one of the concerns I had was something that was addressed up in Chippewa County. Obviously, there's a lot of frac sand mining up in Chippewa County, and processing as well. Chippewa County Land and Water Conservation Department got funding to do a study of the groundwater impacts associated with processing. And I realize there are different processes depending upon what type of sand you have, whether you have to, I don't know, laminate, what do you call it? But the washing and the chemicals used, do you have any information about impacts on groundwater?
That knows that.
Well, the results of that study are actually online with the County Land Conservation Office. So if you want to look up that information, I think that's good. The use of the water depends upon how much use or how much water we have, because I know that a lot of the sand mining companies are actually recycling some of the stuff, and more recently, their stormwater ponds are filled to the hilt and wastewater ponds are filled, and they're talking about drainage right into a creek. So it's a multifaceted question, and I don't know if I can answer specifically because you need to go to the website to find out. And it isn't just water quantity with the processing, it's also water quality and the draw upon people's wells and the heavy metals in the water that get into the well water. And they are finding some problems with that.
They have identified some of the chemicals that are used in the washing process, or is it basically just water that they're using?
Well, they're using water and chemicals. Flocculants are used, of course, to settle out
There is
sediments.
help out Pat here. There's a wealth of information on that topic. The area where I live is again Trumbull County. We have some major mines in the county, as well as these mom and pop mines which are dying out, as Ted said. But if you talk to me later, I think after the session, I can give you more information. But there is quite a bit of information on it. The industry will say. The industry will say all the chemicals we use, the flocculants and so forth, are harmless, and we shouldn't worry about them. Actually, one thing I would like to add here is I've been involved in fighting the sand mines in my area since the last 8 years. And one of the things that's most disconcerting is that the level of apathy from other places of the state. Ted is talking about waste and water and the amount of waste and things like that. We've been saying this for 7 years. It was obvious at the beginning, when the mines first moved in, that it was destroying a irreplaceable resource, that it was wasting millions of gallons of water. And honestly, I don't want to get angry, but I gave up. years ago trying to convince people in Green Bay or Madison or anywhere else, they just don't get it. And when you talk about talking to the people on the golf course, that is the trouble. They have so much money. They can buy so much, they can buy out newspapers, they can donate hundreds of thousands of dollars in local communities. They have so much money to throw around that it's very difficult, very frustrating to try to combat it.
False information is also created. And the public can come forth with the information, but there's also false information, or what do you want to call it, propaganda, that's often issued. So you really need to be cautious about what you read.
Are there any other questions? Yes, sir.
Do they use, for flocculants, do they use polyacrylamides here?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, those are really dangerous, and you're putting that into the ground like just bad news. Polyacrylamide breaks down to acrylamide, which is a neurotoxin and carcinogen. And so, if they're recycling their water and they're putting acrylamide, they're really doing that's a serious health hazard.
It's very difficult to get that assessed, at least in Wisconsin labs. I don't know if any Wisconsin labs are able to detect acrylamides when you get down to these small part per billion units. The one lab I've ID'd that's pretty close to home would be PACE, P-A-C-E, out of the Twin Cities, that can actually test for acrylamide. So we do have that ability, but you're going to have to search for the right lab.
And you shouldn't have to do that work.
No, well, you do.
Yes, sir.
Obviously, there's a limit as to how much water you could possibly draw on the ground. And we're drawing more and more with farmers and with these mines, but when we get to this limit, is there going to be any way that it can be parceled out as to who gets it?
So that question has already come up in the West.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, look at the water rights.
Oh, yeah, I know that, but I'm talking about Wisconsin.
Well, it'll just come to the same situation where the water rights are worth millions of dollars, and when they're bought and sold, where they pump wells dry and they run pipelines for 300 miles across the mountain to get water from some other lake. We've taken water, groundwater for granted for all these years, but yes, with that kind of consumption, of course, there has to be.
We don't in Ohio where I live, one of the things that's come up that we could maybe, I showed you that trend in water demand, and if you want to call a wind getting to bending that curve so that it falls back in the other direction or stabilizes, one thing that people have been talking about right now is we have a conservancy district in Ohio called the Muskingum Watershed Conservancy District. They sell water to the oil and gas industry for $4.25 per 1,000 gallons. So what that doesn't mean, that number doesn't mean anything to you, but what it does mean is it's 0.25% of all costs. So look at what you spend 0.25% of all your costs on. Do you really worried about that thing? So the reason I mention it is there has to be a supply side incentive put on this industry, because they love to talk about market economics and market forces and the beauties of free market, this, that, the other thing. Well, if you try to burden them with real holistic pricing of water, all of a sudden they will put up a fuss because they know that they are so desperate. And the only way that we see it in Ohio is to raise that number up to $20, $25, $30 per 1,000 gallons. Because what we know is the oil and gas industry, I can't speak to the sand mining industry, oil and gas industry's business models are an inverted pyramid, and that tip of the bottom of the pyramid is founded on cheap water, cheap waste, cheap land. Okay? Getting back to the three pillars of the stool, right? And if you can make any of those or all of those more expensive, they will crumble under their own weight, and we got to get there. So,
Yes, ma'am.
I have more of a statement than a question, if that's okay. I just wanted to say that the high capacity wells legislation that was passed several years ago is allowing them to pump water out of Wisconsin at great rates. I think that this happened in conjunction with when the frac sand mining started in the state. I think Big Ag is also taking a lot of that, the factory farms. So we're losing water in Wisconsin because of our legislature. Our legislature is not protecting our land or our water, our air, or anything. And I just want to say to you that you had felt that people from Madison don't care. I live outside of Madison. I've been up towards frac sand mines years ago. I try to work on this any way that I can. We were chased by some of the frac sand mine companies when we were out there. And we interviewed a woman in her home who had a frac sand mine right across the street. Her family had had a farm there for 150 years. This was handed down. We sat in her living room, which was gorgeous, had huge windows, and they used to be able to open them. She had to keep all of her windows closed now. She had to get a HEPA filter on her house, and her daughter, who's a college student, when she came home, started throwing up blood. Her daughter can no longer visit her in her home. This is a health issue, it's a water issue, it's an air quality issue, it's an agricultural issue, and really what we need to do, in my opinion, is we need to push our legislature to do the right thing. I've spent a lot of time in hearings since 2011. I've never known my senators before. I can tell you all of them by their faces now, because I go there, and we really have to put pressure on the legislature.
Bill, could you just tell everyone what you told me yesterday about those 2 high cap wells?
Well, High Crush is just about, I'd say, as the crow flies, where I grew up, probably about a mile and a half.
Tell me where you live.
And I live by Toma, Wisconsin, out by Wyville, actually. High Crush is on 173, just north of 21, about a mile. And they got caught with 2 high capacity wells. And they got fined, but they don't care. They don't care. They pay off. There's a mine that's through the woods, probably, say 600 yards from my place. They actually pumped out a retention pond before April. So all that water had nowhere to go except into my property. And the people that's where we have ceremony. I'm a traditional Ho-Chunk. That's where we have our ceremony. Nobody wants to have ceremonies at my place anymore because of what's going on. I mean, I walked in there in May and there was still ice that was white, about 1.5 feet thick, and probably 50 yards wide in May. I mean, this should have been melted. There's something going on with all that stuff. I mean, it's, yeah, I told the tribe and said, hey, you know, something's going on here. And the tribe basically put a moratorium on the company that owned that mine. So they hired a couple hosts and said, hey, go talk to the legislature. Maybe they'll let us back in because they're making roads for us. And it's kind of scary because I don't know if I even want to drink my own water or walk into the back of my woods.
This gentleman's had his hand up for longer, but you'd be next, ma'am. Yes, sir. You, right here. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I like the way you monetized the transformation of forest and farm to mining. Have you done anything with jobs? See, one of the big things that the frac sand miners say is you'll get your jobs. But that's not true. But if you're converting forest and farm to mining, what does that do to the number of jobs, the number of people that get employed?
It's a great question. I haven't done the work, but it's something we should do.
Because, I mean, if they have propaganda, we've got to have anti-propaganda, and I think that's a very good
I would respond, but I think, again, I've had a lot of experience. The jobs are very temporary, and the destruction is permanent.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
My question is, you said that in your state, this particular area, they were getting 2.5 cents per 1,000 gallons. In other words, they put a cost on using water.
Yeah.
And
$4.25 per 1,000 gallons.
okay,
So
$4. Okay, but who gets that $4.25?
So that's the rub. So this conservancy district that I mentioned, the MWCD, you can look it up online. I can't even say the word conservancy district in referencing them because they've really sold out. They've sold their community and they've sold their water to the industry. And if you look at how they came to 425, in 2010, they signed an agreement with Gulfport, who's a big energy firm, for $8.25 per 1,000 gallons. Maybe it was 9, I don't remember. Then Antero, another company, came in 2012 and said, hey, we want to do that too. And they said, well, you know, we're going to rip up that original agreement with Gulfport because we're going to go to you, Antero, and say $6.25. And then Gulfport said, well, we want that same deal. Let's rip it up. Sure, let's rip it up. So now we're down to $6.25. So we're going from 9 to $6.25. Then the next agreement that came online in 2015 was $4.25 per 1,000 gallons. There's nowhere that they're going to go to get water other than this Conservancy District. The Conservancy District has a market share, has a corner on the market. So there's no competition that they're facing for this water. So why they lowered the price is because they said, and the Corps of Engineers agreed, that any water that we have to flush from this system at the end of the year is a surplus commodity. Okay, so we're talking about water as a commodity, which gets back to what you were saying in the West. So they said, okay, $4.25 because we just got to get this stuff out of here. Someone's got to use it, and we got to monetize it somehow. And it's not 2.5, it's 0.25% of their costs go to water. And if you add in their waste disposal costs, which is another proxy for, you know, ruinous behavior, they only spend about 1.25% or 1.5%, 1% on all water waste costs. And the answer to your question is it goes back to the MWCD because they haven't balanced their budgets. And they saw this as a win-win. It's the same thing with Kasich when he balanced the budgets in Ohio on the back of the oil and gas boom. You know, he did the same thing and they said, well, if it's good for the governor, it's good for us.
But is this the state gets the money?
No,
the
no,
township?
no.
Who gets that money?
The Conservancy District itself.
They run the high-capacity wells.
There's no high-capacity wells. This is service withdrawal.
But what's a conservancy thing?
It's supposed to be protecting the resources.
If you look up the MWCD, the Muskegon watershed, it's this big bathtub watershed in the southeast Ohio that drains into the Ohio River. So it's this big catchment. And there's a Conservancy District that is in charge. It is a quasi-governmental entity that runs that basin. It dictates, you know, permits for boats, this yada yada yada. And they're the ones that get it. And then that goes back into their ledger. It doesn't go back to the state. It doesn't go back to the individuals in the Conservancy District. It goes to the Conservancy District itself. And you know, if you go from $9 to $4.25, where is the incentive on the industry to use less when you're giving it to them? So that's the problem.
Yeah, lady back there.
We've got to end this.